Guys, I'm going to get started because we don't want to have you lost time here. I'm going to do a presentation today on the essential guide to Bigfoot. I see some friendly faces in the audience. For those of you that don't know me, has anyone ever seen me on TV? No? Okay. I'm on a bunch of TV shows. Whenever you watch a show about Bigfoot or the Mothman or a lot of those, Chupacabra, on a lot of those shows, Travel Channel, History Channel and stuff. I've been investigating Bigfoot pretty much my whole life since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I've never seen one with my own eyes, and I do a lot of surveys too during my lectures, so I'm going to ask you guys right now, how many people here associate the Lake Worth goat man with Bigfoot? Does anybody make that connection? Okay. I mean, first of all, think about the premise of a goat man. It sounds pretty impossible, right? That kind of skirts the rules of biology and stuff. Those of us that investigate Bigfoot are firmly convinced that the Lake Worth goat man was actually a Bigfoot. And how many people think that Bigfoot could exist? Don't be ashamed if you don't put your hand up. Okay, so you're in the minority. Only 18 to 20% of the population think that Bigfoot could exist. 80 to 82% of the people out there don't think it's possible. That doesn't mean people don't love Bigfoot. Everybody loves Bigfoot, right? We love it on TV, we love it in commercials, books, music. So Bigfoot's a big part of our culture. But you ask most people, 80% of the people, do you think it could exist? They're going to say, yeah, no. Well, I've never seen one with my own eyes, but I've been investigating for years. I've found evidence. I'm convinced I've heard it vocalized. In fact, my most convincing encounter was 60 miles due north of here at a place called Cottonwood Lake near Decatur. Thank you. This is the cover of my new book. And by the way, I have copies of my new book available down at the festival if you want to come get one afterwards. The reason I wrote this book is because in the modern day and age we live in with the internet and social media, it's an amazing time we live in because there's so much information. But guess what? With regard to Bigfoot, most of the stuff you found online is not good information. It's lies, it's misconceptions, it's misperceptions. A lot of this internet stuff you find on Bigfoot is entertainment. They want you to get to their website, it's clickbait. They want you to click on their site. So come on over, we got Bigfoot. But there are facts. And there have been scientific studies, and there are guys that spent their whole lives looking for Bigfoot, 40 years in the woods, and sadly most of them have passed away by now. One of them who hasn't is a guy named Peter Byrne, who's 94, who first searched for the Yeti or the abominable snowman in 1956, and spent many years in California and Oregon searching for Bigfoot. All right. This is a picture or a frame from the famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage, shot at Bluff Creek, California, October 20th, 1967. Has anybody seen this footage? Everyone seen the footage? How many people think it's real? Don't be afraid. If you don't raise your hand, there's no shame. Be a critical thinker. Halfway done? Okay. The reason I show this footage is because most Bigfooters are convinced it is authentic, and therefore this becomes our archetype. An archetype in science is this is the model that we're all going to use to say, okay, this is what a Bigfoot is supposed to look like. We call her Patty because she has pendulous breasts, and when she swings around and turns the camera, in frame 352, you can see these large breasts, so we know that Patty's a female. Okay, so these are the general characteristics. Now, a word about sourcing information. There are now 6,000 Bigfoot sightings that have been documented. Some of those may be made-up stories, some of those might be misidentifications of bears, but I challenge anybody to explain away 6,000 Bigfoot sightings. I've personally interviewed hundreds of people that claim they've seen Bigfoot. It's pretty convincing once you talk to hundreds of people that say, I grew up in the woods, I've been a hunter my whole life, I know what I saw, it was a Bigfoot. Okay, so drawing from those thousands of Bigfoot sightings that started back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a guy named John Green. He was a well-known author, newspaper reporter, and he began to accumulate all of the sightings and put them into a database. Nowadays, you have groups like the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, that compile all these sightings. So, drawing on those thousands of sightings, guess what? There are consistent models that keep popping up. They're not all over the map, okay? So these are the main characteristics of a Bigfoot as we know it. It's a human-like form. It's bipedal, meaning it walks upright on 2 legs. That's what's most startling when people see Bigfoot. It walks just like a person. Not exactly like a person because its locomotor pattern has been studied and it's a little bit different, but It walks mostly on two legs, it swings its arms, it takes long strides, it walks like us. That's pretty amazing when you see something like that. Its body is mostly covered in hair. Most eyewitnesses say that it's covered in a uniform covering of hair anywhere from 1 to 4 inches long. So now we're painting a picture, right? It's a bipedal animal, it walks on two legs, but it's covered in hair. Pretty startling. It's gigantic in stature, and we're going to talk about how gigantic in a moment. Almost every witness that sees a Bigfoot says it has incredibly broad shoulders, really broad shoulders, much broader than a human's shoulders. Why is that important? Because it eliminates one of the most common animals that's misidentified as a Bigfoot, which is a bear. Bears don't have shoulders, right? They're quadrupeds, they stand up on their hind legs sometimes, but their shoulders slope down. Bigfoot supposedly has very broad shoulders and a head that is said to rest directly on top of the shoulders. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a neck, it just has immense trapezius muscles, so it's really, and that's why Patty has to turn her whole upper body to look back, because the neck is very short and powerful. Many eyewitnesses say that the arms appear proportionally longer than a human's. They usually say they reach to the knees, or appear to reach to the knees. Some of that might be an illusion, because their shoulders are set so high that the arms look very long. But if they're stooped over when they're walking, which they appear to, and they swing their arm low, then yes, it would look like the arm is much longer than ours. It probably is. It's called the intermembral index, the ratio of arms and limbs on a primate. Okay, so how big do they really get? And this is me, of course, standing next to a mock-up of a Bigfoot at an exhibit. And at this particular exhibit, they actually let people vote. Does a Bigfoot exist? Yes or no? I don't know the results of that poll. All right, so going back to Patty, the subject in the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage, which is our archetype. How tall is Patty? Does anyone want to take a guess? Yes?
7 feet.
You're very, very close. Very good.
7'3".
7'3". We got a winner. Okay. Was that what you were going to say? Okay. A height of 7'3" was established based on several separate academic studies on the film. You say, well, how can you tell how tall something is in the film? Well, guess what? There were things in the film that were found later. Stumps, logs. Those were all measured. There was several reenactments of the film where they put people out in the, tall people out in the spot, walking and so forth. So, different academic studies came up with 7'3". And that consensus opinion was reached by a guy named Jeff Glickman, who was a forensic film analyst who did an intensive study on the film. A physical anthropologist named Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who many of you have seen on Bigfoot TV shows. A guy named Bill Munns, who creates Hollywood special effects creatures, and he's an expert in that stuff. He's written a book on the film. Renee DeHinden, who spent 40 years looking for Sasquatch. John Kirk, Christopher Murphy, and a guy named Daniel Perez. So a lot of experts have come to the height of 7'3". Why is that significant if the subject in the film is 7'3"? Did you guys know that there are less than 3,000 people in the world who are taller than 7 feet right now? Did you know that? It's a pretty small percentage of the population. In 1967, I imagine there were a lot less people that were over 7 feet tall. So if a lot of people say, well, the Patterson film was faked. It was a guy in a suit. Well, where did you find a guy that was 7'3" tall to wear a suit? And where did you get a suit that would fit a guy that was 7'3" tall, right? Okay. Most hominoids, and let's get this straight, hominoids are us, and gorillas, and orangutans, and chimpanzees. We're all in the hominoid family. Hominoids are sexually dimorphic. Sexually dimorphic means that two individuals within the same species, male and female of different gender, have different physical characteristics. In the case of hominoids, males are bigger than females, right? Human males are bigger than females. Same thing in gorillas and orangutans. Usually at least 15 to 20% bigger, sometimes much larger. So using that as a model, so we know Patty was a female, right? She had breasts. She was 7'3". She was presumably adult. She looked pretty big, pretty full grown. So now the question becomes interesting, is how big could a male get? Anyone want to guess? It's all speculation.
8 to 9 feet.
That's a great guess. That's where I'm at. In my own opinion, a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, the tallest they can get is 9 feet. There are reports out there of them getting 10, 12, 15 feet tall. No way. That's my opinion. And the reason for that is, and guys, I admittedly don't have a lot of scientific credentials, but I work at the San Antonio Zoo, I work around animals a lot, so I'm privy to a lot of information. You have to think in terms of adaptation. All animals have adaptations in nature, right? Adaptations are benefits. They're survival strategies. So if something is big, it gives it a benefit. Hey, I'm bigger than you. But there's a threshold when size suddenly becomes a disadvantage. So you can imagine a Bigfoot that was 12 or 15 feet tall trying to walk through the woods and he keeps bumping his heads on branches and going, oh, I can't hide. So anyways, my own opinion, 8 or 9 feet is the tallest. By the way, based on thousands of Bigfoot sightings that have been fed into a computer, the average height for a Bigfoot is 7'5", maybe 7'10". So again, 8 to 9 feet is probably our tallest. Estimated weights on Bigfoot Sasquatches are 500 to 1,000 pounds. 2 independent studies on Patty and the Patterson-Gimlin film came up with a weight of 500 to 543 pounds. 1,000 pounds for our big, 800 to 1,000 pounds for our big male is not unreasonable. These fit well within the size-mass ratios of other hominoids like gorillas and also bears. And why do I bring up bears? Because bears share the same habitat and ecological system as Bigfoot. They fill a very similar ecological niche. And like Bigfoot, bears are big and they move around a lot. They're endothermic animals with a high metabolism. Okay, some other features. What color is Bigfoot? Anyone want to shout it out? It's like a quiz show. You just kind of, yes sir.
Black or brown?
That's a great guess. Now, this is again based on thousands of sightings that were on independent studies were fed into computers and analyzed. Black and dark is the 55% of eyewitnesses describe black or dark as the color. Brown, 30% of the time, and often people that say they're brown also say there's kind of a reddish brown, like a burgundy or an ochre color. And then only 15% of the time they describe other colors. Well, if like other researchers, I'm convinced that the Lake Worth monster was a Bigfoot, people described it as being white. So that's very rare. But it's not rare in nature per se when you consider that there are, within again, different species, you have individuals that are albinos, or what we call leucistic, where they simply don't have the pigmentation to have darker color. And I meant to mention one other thing about size, which was people are not very good at estimating size. So again, this is all estimates. You can imagine if someone suddenly ran into a Bigfoot in the woods, your adrenaline's pumping, you're scared. Oh, it was 10 feet tall. Well, maybe that's what your adrenaline was saying. Okay, one last note on coloration. Other primates, their colors change, right? We have gibbons at the San Antonio Zoo. The males are born blonde, then they turn dark. But every once in a while, one of those dark males will turn blonde again. And it's just this random thing. And you know, as hominoids get older, a lot of us also get white or silver hair, silverback gorillas and so forth. So hair colors can change. What do their faces look like? Totally subjective. I've spoken to people that said it looked like an extremely human-looking gorilla, and then other people said it looked like an extremely gorilla-looking human. So really the only consensus is that it's kind of a mixture between human and gorilla, and we can all relate to the fact that when you see a gorilla or a monkey at the zoo, sometimes they'll have very human-like looks on their faces, their expressions, and similarly, and not to be unkind, all of us know a few people that have kind of very primitive-looking features, right? It's genetics. Do their eyes glow in the dark? This is a big problem. Many eyewitnesses have said Bigfoot's eyes glow red or glows in the dark. It's impossible that the eyes could be self-illuminated. That doesn't happen in the world of vertebrates. Maybe if Bigfoot was a fish that lived at the bottom of the ocean, maybe its eyes would self-illuminate. So what I think people are talking about here is eye shine, reflection, right? When you see an animal in the woods at night, you shine a light on it, its eyes kind of reflect back. That's because most nocturnal animals have a little ocular membrane known as a tapetum lucidum. It's a little membrane in the eye, and what it does is it reflects, it bounces the light, whatever little light it can gather, it bounces it back and forth to maximize the nocturnal vision. So it's very likely that Bigfoot has a similar tapetum lucidum in its eye, and that its eyes shine or reflect when you shine a light on it. There's a lot of evidence that Bigfoot's nocturnal. Most sightings are at night, or half sightings are at night, I should say. Do they smell bad? Nope. be shy. When they smell bad, they smell really bad. People say they smell like garbage, feces, rotting sulfur, whatever. But you'd probably be surprised to learn that the bad smell associated with Bigfoot is only described about 5 to 14% of the time. So it's very rare that people actually do describe the smell. There are reasons for this, that it might smell bad. Poor hygiene. Lives in a swamp. Eats dead things, right? Those are all reasons that animals might smell bad. My own theory about Bigfoot is that Bigfoot possesses, just like silverback gorillas, possess a specialized sweat gland in their armpits called an apocrine gland. And a recent study on gorillas proved that gorillas can actually turn that sweat gland on, off and on like a switch. So have you ever been to the gorilla exhibit at the zoo and you're like, whew, they smell strong? Well, the gorillas activate that as a defense mechanism. So it's very likely that Bigfoot has a similar mechanism that it can turn on this bad smell if you surprise it or startle it. And yeah, it's a horrible smell, I'm getting out of here kind of thing. By the way, the 14%, this is another quiz show question. The 14% of the time, guess what state that people describe that really bad smell most of the time?
Florida.
Florida, thank you guys. Skunk ape, that's what they call it in Florida. Oh, what did I do? All right. Okay, so let's talk about the feet. This guy on the right here is named Jerry Crew. In October of 1958, he was working on a logging road, driving a bulldozer, and he found a bunch of giant, he started finding these footprints around his bulldozer in August. He would show up to work in the morning and there were these giant big footprints. Finally in October, he had the idea to cast one. Got some plaster and made a cast. And this appeared in a newspaper in Humboldt, California, and that's how the name Bigfoot was born. It was a newspaper thing. Actually, a lot of the local people were calling it Bigfoot, 2 words, Bigfoot, and they put it together. Anyways. Okay, so when was the first footprint cast made? It's a trick question. That's what I led you to believe. But actually, I found out that there was a Bigfoot investigator way back in 1941 named Jack Dunn. He was a sheriff's deputy in Bellingham, Washington, and he had heard about a famous Sasquatch. And if you guys know, Sasquatch is interchangeable with Bigfoot. That's the Canadian name, eh? I'm Canadian, so they go, oh, it's Sasquatch. He's on the couch, eh? Sasquatch was sighted and left a bunch of footprints at a place called Ruby Creek, British Columbia in 1941. Sheriff Joe Dunn went up there, cast a footprint. Sadly, the footprint was destroyed. The plaster cast was destroyed through the years by his family. They were using it as a door stopper, and the kids were like playing toss with it and stuff. But they made a tracing of the Bigfoot print, the Sasquatch print from 1941. And in 1958, when John Green went down to meet Jerry Crew and went down to Bluff Creek, California, he had a sketch of the Bigfoot print, Sasquatch print, and it lined up perfectly. So we now knew at that point, Sasquatch and Bigfoot are the same thing. That's when that happened. Okay. How big are their footprints on average? This is probably a tricky one, so I won't. The average Bigfoot Sasquatch track is 15.5 inches long. By the way, Shaquille O'Neal's foot is 16 inches long. People always ask me that. So, a little smaller than Shaq's foot. 7.2 inches wide. The foot is actually half as wide as the length. It looks superficially like a human print, but it's not. It doesn't have an arch. The heel is proportionally longer and wider. The toes are proportionally more even. There is a big toe, but it's a little smaller. And the toes in general are small compared to the Bigfoot, okay? Why is this important? Because this is exactly what an 8-foot tall, 800-pound biped would need to walk around the woods. Is that a coincidence? A lot of people think that these prints are fake. There's some guy out there with big wooden cutouts on his shoes and he's stomping through the woods. Well, that may be happening sometimes, but footprints like this have been found in British Columbia, California, Washington, Georgia, and have been studied by physical anthropologists. Yes, sir. Oh, stop. Okay. The largest accepted length for a Bigfoot track is 18 inches. That's my own opinion. If anyone shows you a Bigfoot track that's 24 inches long, I don't buy it, guys. That would be your 12-foot, 15-foot Bigfoot, okay? Let's talk about ecology since we're here at an ecological center. Big problem. How many are populating North America? I don't want to go into a whole thing here. There have been several estimates done, but guys, if Bigfoot does exist, there have to be a few thousand of them. There's no way to get around that equation. Otherwise, they would go extinct. There wouldn't be enough genetic viability. Now, keeping that in mind, that's spread over a very large area, right? All over North America. So they're still very rare. What do they eat? Everything. They're generalist omnivores, just like bears. There are accounts of them eating meat, mollusks, berries, tubers. Makes perfect sense. They have a unique walking system. It's kind of different from ours. Am I supposed to be doing questions and answers right now? All right. All right, why haven't we found Bigfoot? I'm going to try to capsulize this for you. This is all in my book, which is available down at the festival. We haven't found Bigfoot remains because A, they're very rare, okay? Just a few thousand. So that means there's about 1,000 bears for every one Bigfoot in North America. That's how rare they are, okay? Someone tells you they have 12 Bigfoots on their property, don't buy it. In my own opinion, Bigfoot has adapted avoidance behaviors specifically geared to avoid us. Bigfoot recognizes and is intelligent enough to know that we are its greatest threat. It's more afraid of us than we are of it, believe it or not, okay? So I think that they are highly nomadic, they're nocturnal, they move around a lot. So, you know, people have said they're supernatural. They seem supernatural because they're so good at moving away from us when we're in their area. That's my opinion. So again, largely solitary, nomadic, nocturnal. They communicate. There's a lot of vocalizations that have been heard. Grunts, whistles, whoops, screams, moans. This is just like all primates. Use a lot of signaling and communication. They possibly manipulate tree branches. They throw rocks at people. It's an aggression, but it's a territorial thing. Get away from me. A lot of accounts of Bigfoot chasing people, but never actually catching them, right? In fact, some witnesses say, I ran out of breath and I stopped, and the Bigfoot stopped. And then when I started running again, it started running. It just wants to get you out of its area, that's all. And they don't like dogs. They kill dogs. Why do they kill dogs? Why are dogs afraid of them? Because dogs are our best friend, and they don't like dogs. Okay. Theories, Gigantopithecus, that's the reconstruction here. There was a giant ape that lived during the Miocene. Could be. Paranthropus was an Australopithecine from Africa, looked like a mini Sasquatch. So there's a lot of things in our fossil history that looked like Bigfoot. That's an important piece of evidence.
All of the pictures that all the presenters have been speaking in the masculine, and all the pictures have been apparently in the masculine. But has there been any reported sightings of female?
Well, Patty, did you see the first slide I put up of the female with the breast? Yeah, she has big pendulous breasts that you can see in the film that swing.
I had to step out, I must have missed it.
Yeah, no, there's a theory about that too, and I don't want to go too much into theories about Sasquatch social structure. But one of the theories about Sasquatch is because there are so many sightings of individuals, solitary individuals, could be that Sasquatch family groups mirror gorilla groups where you have an alpha male with a few females and their juveniles. And then when a male starts getting old enough to challenge that alpha male, he gets driven out of the group. So the vast majority of Bigfoots that are seen are these solitary rogue males that are being pushed out from one group and are traveling to hook up with another group. It's just a theory. And I don't think Bigfoot is connected to UFOs. People always ask me that. There's just not much evidence for that. A lot of people like weird things, and it's like, the weirder the better. Yeah, it's with a UFO, but very, very little evidence of that. And how much time do I have left? Am I done, or should I do a quick Q&A? Bigfoot remains. We went over this. Bigfoot's rare. A lot of animals you don't find their remains. Bear remains, for example, are never found because apex predators like Bigfoot hide their bodies before they die. They may bury their own dead. It's just a theory, but if they're smart enough and if they're able to. And this is something that comes up a lot. Animal remains disappear really darn quick. Think of all the scavengers, insects, bacteria, vultures, coyotes. Even mice will pick up bones and carry them away for the calcium and minerals. So if Bigfoot's a very rare animal and it hides its body mostly before it dies, and then you add the other factor of nature taking its course, that's why we don't have any remains. And we may not have any fossils of Bigfoot either. So I guess I'll leave it there because do I have time for a 5-minute Q&A, or where are we at schedule-wise? Okay. I'll open it up to 5 minutes. I do respectfully ask, we only have 5 minutes, so let's keep it kind of concise.
Okay, I've never asked this question out loud, but, is there any way you can go back to the picture of the female Bigfoot? It's not Patty, but it's from the magazine.
Oh, the Oma. That's Ivan T. Sanderson's
This
Oma.
one, yeah.
Yeah.
So, wasn't there a similar picture? This came out like a few months before the filming of the Patterson-Gimlin film?
Well, in fact, Roger Patterson in his own book has a sketch that looks just like Patty. So that's one of the things that skeptics have brought up in terms of, so it looks similar to that, it has breasts and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say, there's nothing 100%. So it is possible that Patterson actually, but you know, think about how hard it would be to fake breasts on a costume, in addition to the costume itself. That would, to me, that would be a huge undertaking to try to fake that as well. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Why do you think it is that most of the time when they find a footprint, it's just one? You don't see others, sometimes you might, but a lot of times it's just one.
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that they may be good at disguising their footprints, again, in avoidance behavior. So if they leave one, it's like an accident, like, oh crap, I left one there. Okay, that's one theory. The other thing is that, you know, a footprint is basically just the impact that a foot makes in the ground in that particular circumstance. So for whatever reason, the substrate was just right. I walked, you know, the pressure, the velocity, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there are times that you could track any animal and find one really good footprint of any animal and say, well, shoot, where are the rest of the, okay, I guess it stepped on there and stuff. So I don't think that Bigfoot vanishes into another portal if, I'm not saying you're inferring that, but that's why, oh, Bigfoot's interdimensional because they only found one footprint.
We have to say that for their primary competitor, I guess, would bears be their next, as far as vying for food, and are there any stories about Bigfoot and bears getting into it?
I've heard some ambiguous stories, like from Alaska and stuff, of bears and Bigfoot, but for example, brown bears, Ursus arctos, which includes the grizzly bears, the Kodiak bears, all of those bear species are mostly diurnal. They come out at night, or mostly during the day. I'm sorry, diurnal means active during the day. If Bigfoot is mostly nocturnal, then that's an example of how those two species worked out in arrangement. You come out during the day, and I'll come out at night, and again, just speculation, but it's a good question. Yes, sir.
This ties in with his question. It seems like if the footprints are that big and well pronounced and everything, you can just follow the footprints to where the possible lair of the Bigfoot is, maybe the Bigfoot himself or something.
Well, that's true if you can find a good enough trackway, but I mean, even Patty, they tried to track her. A guy named Bob Titmus came out 8 days after Patterson and Gimlin left the film, and he was a tracker. And he was able to track it up to the top of a hill, and it looked like she had sat down and looked at the guys while they were, you know, gathering their thoughts after the incident. But after that, they just lost the trackway, so. But, you know, it's a fair question, but again, footprints, you know, try it yourself sometime. You know, walk a mile through the woods and see if your trackway, you would be able to leave a footprint every single time. Eventually you would run into obstacles and things that would, you know, maybe it bounce too hard and dry, or, you know.
One last question.
In Cottonwood Lake?
Yeah,
When were you up there?
August 18th, 2003.
2003, I hunted deer up there in the grasslands.
I recorded ape-like grunts coming out of the brush. I found footprints. I found mutilated turtle shells that had been ripped in half like pistachio shells.
And did you do a show in Mexico?
Yes.
What was it called?
I did a chupacabra show called
You were
the...
in the mountains there in Mexico City.
Oh, that was Terror from the Skies, Monster Quest.
Terror?
Monster Quest, Terror from the Skies, Season 3. Thank you, guys. Sorry, it was kind of crowd.